We have a corporation that's tax designated as an S Corp, or we have an LLC that's tax designated as an S Corp. The advantage here is that the owners can now declare themselves as employees of the corporation or of the LLC. Over long periods of time, real estate has constantly proven that it will appreciate in value. The overarching message is like, why are we trying to do this? Why do we get on these podcasts and hammer waivers, membership agreements, and operating agreements, and make sure you're following the FTC? And why do we give these lectures? And the bottom line is, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is protect the money that you are actually taking home from the gym.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cheer Biz Podcast. We are here with your favorite, my favorite, everyone's favorite, Matt Becker, Esquire, attorney at large, the man who makes sure that you are protected within your business and make sure that your contracts and waivers and everything is perfect and your operating agreements and all that jazz. He can help you with all of it. And today he is joining us. I'm gonna just be honest. He's joining us the day before he moves, and he's actually moving to where we are going to be able to do in-person podcasts.
I can't wait.
He's moving to Oregon. We're going to be like next door to each other. Basically, we're going to be best friends. We're getting walkie-talkies so we can talk back and forth.
Oh yeah.
I mean, all hardcore best friend life. We might even do the tin cans and
the tin cans with the string in between.
Yeah. I mean, it would have to be like a 15-mile string, but we could try it. But yeah, so he's getting ready to move and he is joining us today. By the time you're listening to this, he will already be done moving.
Thank God.
Or at least he'll be in Oregon. You know, if you've ever moved before, you know that you generally have like at least 2 boxes that just don't get unpacked for like 2 years. And then you're like, what are those? He's joining us today and we are going to be talking about asset and wealth protection. Is that correct phrasing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Much more exciting topic than like operating agreements.
Yes. Although I think we make those pretty exciting. So asset and wealth protection. What the heck does that
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start from the assumption that like we are not out there operating a business for charity. Right? Like we didn't open a gym because we just want to provide a cool place for people to work out or for kids to come and learn cheerleading because we have some sort of altruistic love to just watch kids learn how to do cheerleading. We did it because ultimately, hopefully, especially if we're following what you guys are teaching people through Next Gen, we're making money. And not only is the business making money, but we're making some kind of profit from that money. Right. And so I think it's been an error of mine over the last couple of years in the way that we talk about gym lawyers to basically make it sound like I think we really come off as like, do what we tell you to do or you're going to get sued and lose everything. You know, it's a fair messaging. I mean, it is sort of like the bare bones of like what we're really trying to do. But the overarching message is like, why are we trying to do this? Why do we get on these podcasts and hammer waivers, membership agreements and operating agreements and make sure you're following the FTC? And why do we give these lectures? And the bottom line is at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is protect the money that you are actually taking home from the gym. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we want to know like, what do we do with that money? Does it just sit in an account? Do we buy things with it? Do we invest it? Do we buy real estate? Like, how can we then take, let's say $2,000 a month that we're making from the gym and grow it so that X number of years down the road, we actually have some sort of definition of wealth, which is essentially freedom from having to rely on somebody else to fund us through the rest of our lives. And so everything we're doing in gym lawyers is technically trying to protect the gym owner from any sort of legal aspect that could hit their business, that could destroy their potential of growing wealth. That's what we're talking wealth protection.
First off, you said right at the beginning, you know, hopefully you didn't open your gym with the altruistic purpose of just creating a place to do cheerleading. And unfortunately, I know that is all too common in our industry that people start out very altruistically of like, I want to win, I want to be competitive, I want to, create this space. And just because you've done that doesn't mean that you can't eventually pivot to being a profitable, successful business. I talk a lot about this in the book that's behind me, The Charge What You're Worth. And actually, Matt just talked about, building wealth and becoming wealthy and kind of what that sort of means. And we also, I talk about it in the book because a lot of people have kind of a misnomer about what it means to be wealthy. They think of it as kind of a negative of like, oh, well, if you're wealthy, you're bad. You're Scrooge, you're money bags, you're the evil billionaire. And the only way to get wealthy is to take money from your, to take money from your staff and overcharge people and do all of these things and not treat people well. And I do just want to emphasize, because I know you, that in NextGen, and I know you're not recommending, like, we believe that you can build long-term financial health and wealth and freedom without taking advantage of your employees, price gouging people. Like, you can run an effective business and still become profitable and have it be a value add to your bank statement, to your family's life, to your financial health long term. So I just wanted to touch on that. And then you would also consider the gym is one of our assets, right? That we protect. So essentially, when we're talking waivers, operating agreements, all of that stuff, that's really the protection of that asset. We want to make sure that we limit liability and ability for someone to come after us to take money from the company. Is that accurate?
That's fair. Yes. And we need to think of this on two different levels. Okay. We have the business asset or assets. If we have more than one location, right? We have the business asset that's growing, and think of that like maybe buying real estate. Okay. We buy, not necessarily our primary home. Yes, that's going to grow in value, but what I'm talking about is like we invest in some sort of real estate, like rental property. Okay, so we have our primary home, and then we have money we've made from the gym, and we buy a second home, and that's going to be real estate. That's going to be our rental property. Well, again, that rental property, one, pays us a little bit, maybe if we can charge more in rent than our mortgage every month. Okay, so we get to grow a little bit more there. We have a little bit more expendable income. But then two, over long periods of time, real estate has constantly proven that it will appreciate in value. Okay, there are times in the market where it goes down, but ultimately it's always on some sort of an upward trajectory. So then at some point later in life, it makes sense to us, okay, I'm going to sell that house and I'm going to have $100,000, $200,000 worth of equity so that when I sell the house, I now make that money back. It's the same way in our business. Okay, we open up a business, we start to make some money from the business, we're supporting ourselves, we have a livable wage, we have excess to start to do things like buy rental properties. But at the end of the day, at the time that it is to retire, we can then sell that asset, sell that business. A lot of cheer owners do this. We buy and sell gyms back and forth, right? And there's a profit to that because you have grown a business that's self-sustaining, that is earning you money.
Yeah, hopefully you've built a business that is self-sustaining and making money, and you can
Right.
sell it for some sort of a profit, which if you're not sure how that works, check out the Academy. Actually, at our Elevate level, we walk through an entire year-long process of determining your enterprise value and then increasing that and solving issues so you then are a more valuable asset at the end. So it's actually a new program we rolled out. It's pretty cool. So let's talk about, now we're expanding past the business when we talk asset wealth protection. And you kind of mentioned, what do you do with that money, that additional money? What do we do with that? Talk me through what's the next piece of this asset and wealth protection as you guys see it.
Okay. So first and foremost, like the things that you and I have talked about over like the last 2 or 3 years are all designed to set this single business that we have so that we are setting it up correctly to avoid things like employee issues. That's why we have employment contracts, so that we don't end up with unemployment compensation disputes or workers' comp issues, tax classification issues from the IRS. These are all things that can come at the business and can destroy the value of the business. Okay, so we're protecting that. Then we have tuition agreements, make sure that we're compliant with federal and state law so that we don't have issues there. Then we have liability waivers to make sure that when that person unfortunately falls from the top of the pyramid, which for whatever reason, I've gotten 3 calls in the last 3 weeks about this. Somebody falls from the top of the pyramid and they end up injuring themselves. We don't have to bankrupt the entire business because of that injury. Okay, we make sure that we got the insurance that's going to cover and everything. All right, so these are all things that we're doing here to package up this business so that you as the gym owner can continue to make money for it, and ideally, it's growing in value. All right. Once we have that, and we're starting to see more and more profit coming out of the business, the question then becomes, all right, what do we do now? Okay, well, we want to think about isolating, and we want to think about protecting, and then we want to think about growing. Okay, so what do we do with it? Well, let's go back to that original business. Are there ways that we can continue to isolate our assets that are either contained in or coming out of that business? You follow me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Look at this. We're going to consider it to be 2 primary assets within the business. There's the bank account, okay, and there's the equipment. So those are the 2 things where we have value in the equipment. If we're ever going to sell the gym, we're selling the equipment. Okay, there's value there. And then there's some sort of bank account membership, okay, to it, in which all of the revenue is coming into the gym each month or however, in another way that you track it. Okay, so we want to, are there other ways that we can kind of isolate those 2 assets from any kind of potential legal issue that is going to come in, again, through employees, through liability, through memberships, all right? And is there a way that we can then isolate that? There are. We can now, because we are making so much money from the gym that we want to make sure that we don't expose that money and we continue to protect that business asset. We're going to split that business into 2. So we've got 1 corporation or LLC. We've talked about the distinction between those 2 before. Both are legal entities meant to protect the individual owner or owners from liability. Okay. So we take that and we split it, and we take the original LLC or corporation, and that is only going to now own the bank account. Okay. And then we take out a second LLC. It's just an equipment LLC. And we sell that equipment over into a second LLC. Okay. So what we've done essentially is, if a lawsuit now comes down into the business, usually through employment, membership, or some sort of personal injury, that lawsuit, if it gets anywhere near the business through the insurance, is only worth what is technically left in the business bank account. Okay. And we can talk about like accounting ways to do this, but if the gym owner is operating the business bank account properly, there's really only enough money in there to cover the regular expenses with employees, with your rent and whatever, and then a little bit extra for a cushion. Okay. So if your average expenses every month are like $6,000 a month, maybe you only keep $10,000 in the business, and the rest of it is coming to you as the owner, which we're then going to talk about what to do with in a moment.
Can I pause right there?
Yes, you can.
Because I have a question. Because I have a couple gym owners that they are risk averse. And because they're risk averse, they are very uncomfortable not having significant sums of money in the bank account as this is my safety net. And so they'll have their OpEx account, they'll have, their payroll account, and then they'll have like an emergency savings account, but they'll keep upwards of $100,000 in it.
Yeah. Don't.
And I have always said, I think that's a bad idea.
It is a very bad idea.
I've actually always said it's a bad idea, more from just that money's doing nothing. So have money work for you. It's the best lever you can pull on outside of, starting a new company to make additional revenue. Like if you want to talk passive income, that is literally what we're talking about here. But you're saying that that's potentially a bad idea because now when someone sues you, they're coming after all of those assets within the business if they win and they get past your insurance amount. And so now all they can really go after is what's left in the bank account.
That's right. Yep. If we've done it that way and we've isolated it that way, the bank account is going to be their primary mode and again, this is assuming that they're not piercing the corporate veil of the company, which again, we've talked about a little bit up to this point, but we can talk more specifically about that. If
what
the
about
corporation,
like those massive judgments where it's like you get found liable for $25 million, but you don't even have remotely that amount? Like, what do you do? A payment plan for 25 mil? Like, how does that even work?
That's always the issue from, let's say, the defense perspective of the lawsuit is, sure, you guys can go after $25 million, but the insurance policy is going to cap out at potentially $2 million aggregate, maybe $3 million aggregate for claims. And beyond that, the company doesn't have the money. What are you going to do? Okay. If I get a $20 million lawsuit against your corporation and I capped out insurance, that money has to come from somewhere. And 9 times out of 10, what that ends up meaning is you as the company owner are just going to bankrupt the company because there's not enough money there. And you're going to liquidate everything that you have within the company in order to pay out as much of that lawsuit as you possibly can.
But if there's nothing to liquidate aside from the bank accounts,
then that's it.
There's nothing to liquidate unless
liquidate.
They can pierce the corporate veil and they can create that.
Right. And then they can get at the individual owner, which again, this is misproper management of a corporation or an LLC, commingling personal funds with business funds, things that can go with and allow a lawsuit, because nothing in the law is black or white, and allow a lawsuit to go through the legal entity to get at the individual owners. And that's why we talk about things like you have to have bylaws, you have to have operating agreements, you have to have shareholder agreements. All of this corporate documentation that is so not exciting to talk about, but is incredibly necessary for you to have because the law says you have to have it and it's not discretionary. If you don't have it, then you don't have it. And you're giving the lawsuit the ability to get through that LLC, through that corporation, and get at you as an individual. So let's go back to our scenario.
I need to stop interviewing you, Matt, because every time I do, I'm like, I don't know that I have bylaws.
You have I thought you have an LLC. Is it a corporation? Oh,
well,
you only have
LLC
bylaws for corporations.
Okay. I was like, wait a minute. I don't know that I have bylaws.
Nope. All you need to worry about is having a
operating agreement.
An operating agreement. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, wait a minute, Matt. You're giving me a longer list of things I have to do.
You're all right.
Okay, go.
Which is why, that's why we oftentimes, if we get to talk to a gym owner early enough in the process or a new gym owner, we say, just do this under an LLC. Don't worry about a corporation, because LLCs are so much easier to manage, easier to protect. Okay. There are even times that we'll talk to cheer owners because corporations, these gyms, most cheer gyms have been around long enough that like they're still filed as corporations. Because for whatever reason, accountants love corporations. But anyway, we can go through a process in certain states to convert it to an LLC. It's not a difficult thing. We've done it with a couple of cheer gyms, but that's our primary reason for it is like, we want to be able to show that you're maintaining and operating this thing properly and its formalities under the law. LLC is going to be easier to do that than a corporation. Okay. So you're good, Dan.
All right. Success. Okay.
Back to the fun of this.
Back to the fun of it. So we're using those, that not fun stuff to protect us. So I kind of paused you in the middle of, you're like, okay, they can only go after the bank account. So let's pick back up there. Cause I think I interrupted your brilliant train of thought of now what are we doing? So we are separating, we're splitting the business. We're having an equipment business, and then we're having our bank account business. What's next? Okay.
So from there, again, the reason that we're doing this is so that, God forbid, that lawsuit comes through and it exceeds the insurance policy. And we can say, so sorry, there's only $100,000, I'm sorry, there's only $10,000 in the account. We're filing bankruptcy. And most gym owners are going to go, well, then I'm out of business. That's not entirely true, because we've taken that equipment and we've spun it off into its own LLC, completely isolating it from this lawsuit that came through that bankrupted the business. So now you still own that $100,000 worth of equipment. You could sell it and walk away, right? Typical asset sale. Or you just start a new business and you can just open up a new LLC and restart the business. Okay. And now you've just got that business LLC again, because we have the equipment LLC over here, and you can just get it rolling. And again, nothing is that clear or black and white. So we do need to make sure that like coming through, like you can't just bankrupt this LLC and spin it off to another LLC and start that up in order to avoid the judgment. But there are ways that you can do it that allows the gym owner to continue to operate even though they had to shut down that original business because they isolated the equipment. So the equipment wasn't also lost in that lawsuit.
Makes sense. So I have a question that is potentially you're going to go, Dan, that's off the rails, but it's come up recently for a number of people that have talked to me.
Mm-hmm.
What about a lease and personal guarantees? There's a lot of personal guarantees when we're working with landlords and financing and things like that. So what about that?
Okay. So let's just cover really quickly what the heck is a personal guarantee. These are more and more prevalent these days, again, than they were like if you signed your lease 10 or 15 years ago. Almost like one time per year will I see a lease that does not come with a personal guarantee. All right. Basically, whenever we go to sign a lease, we want the named tenant in that lease to be your legal entity. So either your corporation or your LLC. Why? Because if there's a breach of that lease, we want that lawsuit to come at that LLC, not go at the individual owner. All right. We're protecting the individual owner's assets, wealth, money, house, bank account, whatever. All right. 9 times out of 10, maybe 9.95 times out of 10, the landlord in the beginning is going to say, that's fine. I'll name the tenant as the LLC, but I'm going to force you, the owner or owners of the LLC, to sign a personal guarantee. And gym owners will go, well, wait a second. Didn't I just expose myself personally to issues coming out of the lease because I'm personally guaranteeing that the LLC will abide by the lease through the entire term? Yes, technically you did. However, once you sign a lease, customarily you are stuck for the term of that lease. Okay. So if you sign the lease as a personal individual, as the tenant, you can't change that very easily until you get to the end of your 5, 7, or 10-year term. Then we can ask the landlord to adjust it. A personal guarantee is infinitely renegotiable. Just because we sign that now doesn't mean in 18 or 24 months, we can't go back to the landlord and say, hey, landlord, we have shown perfect payments since we've opened. Maybe we even have additional cash so we can double our security deposit. But let's go ahead and talk about nullifying that personal guarantee. Okay. And we actually recommend gym owners who do this to come back to us about once every year to open up a conversation with their landlord to ask to nullify the personal guarantee. Some landlords will allow us to put language in there that says if the gym owner shows perfect payments for 18 months or in any span of the lease, if they go on like perfect payments for a period of 18 months, then the personal guarantee automatically becomes null and void. So there are ways we can work the gym owner out of the personal guarantee. Okay. Questions before I expand on to that?
No.
Okay. So originally, when we started talking, I said, we're thinking about wealth protection in 2 different aspects here. There's the business and there's the personal. We've talked to this point about the business protection, okay, and how we're setting up the business, maintaining the business, isolating the owner's liability from any lawsuit or anything that comes down to the business. Okay, we can do similar things over here in the personal. Okay, so we can set up trusts are a big one, and people will say, well, like, what's a trust? A trust, it's kind of complicated, but in its basic form, a trust is another form of legal entity, usually designed for personal individuals, in which we take our personal assets and we give them to the trust to own. Okay. It's kind of like how the LLC owns the equipment or the LLC owns the business. the trust owns your assets. All right. And then usually you or somebody else is the trustee, the person who maintains the trust. And then there's usually a beneficiary of the trust. Okay. And this stuff starts to get a little bit in the weeds. So follow-up questions. But there are then two different types of trusts. There's a revocable and there's irrevocable. Revocable trust means I can easily put things into the trust. I can leave it in there. And then at some point in the future, I can take it back out of the trust if I need to. Problems with a revocable trust is if a lawsuit comes at me through that personal guarantee, the assets that are in the revocable trust are technically vulnerable. Okay. Alternatively, we can use what's called an irrevocable trust, which means once I put things in the trust, it's going to be really hard for me to get it back out of the trust. The nice thing about an irrevocable trust is that if that lawsuit comes at me through the personal guarantee, the assets that are held by the irrevocable trust are protected and they can't go after it. Okay. So that's one way that usually once a client hits a certain age, like looking toward retirement, they fully own their house. They don't need a lot of liquid assets anymore, like the ability to have a lot of cash on hand. We can start to look at the advantages of putting something in an irrevocable trust. That way it's just going to sit there and wait essentially for the person to die. And then usually somebody like the kids are the beneficiary of the irrevocable trust, and we can protect those assets. Follow me?
Totally. And I've heard people talk about trusts a lot and I've understood them, but I've gone back and forth on like, okay, so does a trust make sense for me? Because obviously I want to protect my assets as much as possible. So I probably have some work to do with this as well, which just stresses me out to think about having to split my businesses even more, because I just split out, I have Oregon Dream Teams and then I have Dream Camps, and Next Gen is a separate entity. But now it's like, okay, so Dream Camps owns a lot of equipment, ODT owns a lot of equipment. Do I split those out again and have, one bank account business and one equipment business? So sounds like yes, but maybe. So much paperwork. Why is there so much paperwork? It's like you attorneys find ways to make sure you have jobs.
I know we do, right? That's like people will say like, well, is it hard to do this? And I was like, well, it's not. It's just a ton of paperwork to do it. If you can tolerate the cost of doing it up front, if you're like almost going to be a new gym owner and you're listening to this and you have a little bit of excess cash, it's far easier to do this up front to start it this way. But most newbies don't have that sort of upfront cash. And so they usually have to make some cash, and then we worry about splitting all this stuff off down the road. But from a personal asset perspective, the other thing that you touched on very briefly, Dan, is can we invest money? So we talked in the beginning about like, okay, we've got profits coming out of the gym. Let's just say I make $8,000 a month from the gym, but my average expenses to live are only like $5,000. Well, now I've got $3,000 extra each month. What do I do with it? Do I just let it sit in my personal bank account? Do I put it in some sort of low or high interest savings account, which is a sort of an oxymoron? Okay. Or can I invest this money? And investing oftentimes, I think to gym owners, and to me also in the beginning, you're like, oh, investing, that's like I don't understand what any of that stuff is. That's like, I got to be like a millionaire in order to invest my money. And that's not true. Once you have any kind of money, I mean, I literally have an investment account that takes like $250 a month out of my checking account because it's a nominal amount of money that I'm not going to miss, that over a year, ends up at, somewhere around like $3,000. And then you get what's called compounding interest on that. And so 30 years later, I've never missed $250 coming out of my account, but now I've got this giant pool of money that I didn't do anything for, right? It just sat there and grew and grew and grew. And the nice thing about those investment accounts is, let's go back to the personal guarantee. I take, and even though I make some money, I put as much as I can away into these investment accounts. The majority of your investment accounts are what's called ERISA protected, which is a federal law that basically says this account isn't exposed to the majority of creditors. I sign a personal guarantee. Lawsuit comes at me because my LLC defaults on the lease. Once again, I'm only sitting on like $10,000 in my bank account. So landlord's going to have a hard time getting at my personal wealth because I've moved that personal wealth around. I've isolated it. I've protected it. I've hid it from potential creditors.
Is a high value cash life insurance plan ERISA protected? Is that also like, would those funds be protected from a creditor?
That's a very good question. I do not believe, you mean like a whole life policy?
Yeah, a whole life policy, but like where you have like a high cash value in it, because you can take loans against your life insurance policy and leverage those into different avenues. There's a lot of, I'm not going to go deep down the rabbit hole in it, but Sean Ryder, Jeff Smith do a lot of stuff with this. Like, would that also be considered? I mean, is a life insurance policy protected from a creditor being able to come after it?
Yeah, I have to be very careful about making generality statements when it comes to investing because I am not a financial planner. I'm not an insurance broker. I can talk legal about it. And if a gym owner wants to know, like, what about a Roth IRA or a 401k or, a SEP account or something like that, like I can talk generally about that stuff. But I got a financial planner that if you ever want specific information of, I kick those questions over there. Quick little Google search says, yes, the ERISA can protect a whole life policy if they are provided to employees as a benefit of employment. So yes and no, under certain circumstances, a whole life policy would be protected as an ERISA asset or ERISA protected asset.
So now we were talking investment, and you were mostly talking about like if you're taking extra money, like if you're taking more than you need for cost of living, right? You're paying yourself more, you can definitely invest that money. But what if you don't want to take it out of the business per se? Like you don't want to pay it to you personally. Can a business make investments?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So let's go down a little bit of this route. Let's say you are already a corporation and you're already tax designated as a C or as an S corp. Okay. We're just going to set that over to the side and we're going to come back to that. Alternatively, you are an LLC. There are 3 technical tax designations if you're a sole owner LLC. We'll go simple. Okay. We can just be a self-employed individual, a disregarded entity, that all the money that comes to the LLC is yours. You pay self-employment taxes on it. The second designation is an S corp. The third designation is a C corp. Very few people are going to take advantages of filing their LLC as a C corp. You have to have X amount of money, etc. Okay. So usually the second tax designation is an S corp for an LLC. This usually becomes advantageous when gross income exceeds about $70,000 a year. I'm sorry, net income. When net income from the LLC exceeds about $70,000 a year, usually then it's a good time to have a conversation with your accountant about, should I be redesignating as an S corp? Okay. I can go down the rabbit hole a little bit on why if you want me to.
We have some other content on that, so I don't think you need
to. So we have a corporation that's tax designated as an S corp, or we have an LLC that's tax designated as an S corp. The advantage here is that the owners can now declare themselves as employees of the corporation or of the LLC. There are tax advantages there, but to answer the question, we can then set up a SEP account, an SEP. I can't remember right off the top of my head what it stands for, but this is an investment account. It's essentially an employee retirement account, okay, that the company is going to pay into. I believe that the max is about like $2,000 to $2,500 a month that the company can invest on behalf of the employee into this retirement account that is then tax deductible to the business, advantageous to the owner, and will continue to grow protected.
Okay. Awesome. So we've talked about a lot of different stuff, kind of bounced around, and I know that's mostly my fault, and I know you have a limited amount of time. So as we try and put a bow on what looked like I wrapped it for Christmas, meaning wasn't really well wrapped up. But as we go to put a bow on our ugly package that's not like fully wrapped, we may need to revisit this at a later time. And also just, I would say asset protection, wealth protection is complicated because it's going to be so situationally dependent. Was that accurate? Like each person is going to need different things.
Oh, it evokes the classical "it depends" answer from an attorney, your financial planner, whatever. Because yes, there are so many rabbit holes and changes in directions we can go with it.
But ultimately, I mean, the lesson to take away from this is if you are starting to run a successful company that's starting to actually have net profits and net owner benefits, and you're not just operating in the red every month and just trying to make rent, but we're starting to generate legitimate revenue that is going out of the business either to you personally, or you're putting money aside. At that point in time, you should probably be making a plan. Not probably, you should be making a plan for how you're going to protect your assets in your company. And or even if you just, I mean, arguably, maybe even if you're not netting money, but if you own a lot of equipment, you still may want to make an asset protection plan because you own a bunch of things.
Yes. So we're going to break down any owner of a gym into one of four categories as far as asset protection is concerned. The first person, the new gym owner, they're the dreamer. They're the ones who have this idea and they think this thing is going to grow and they believe it's going to grow into something really big, but they're just starting the gym and they're not making any profits yet. That's the person who should be talking to professionals, whether they're legal professionals, tax professionals, so that we're creating a plan to get to step number 4. And you're right, Dan, like, what if you own a lot of equipment? What if you just spent $150,000 to open up your gym? We don't want that to all come crashing down. Second stage is the operator. This is the person who has opened the gym, is operating the gym, owner operated, making some little bit of profit. That's the person who really needs to start talking to a financial planner of some sort just to get that little trickle of money going. How can we start the process? You don't have to wait until you make $1 million. Third step is the owner. This is the person who is now working on the business, not in the business. They've got enough money that's sustaining themselves, and now they have excess cash flow. So what the heck do we do with that money? That's what a majority of this conversation has been about. And we've only kind of touched the surface because it is very complex stuff. And it's really hard to like conceptually just listen to it. We're trying to make it as much as interesting as possible, right? Step number 4, or person number 4 is what we call the legacy. This is the person who has multiple streams of income, has multiple locations, has the nonprofit set up to benefit the LLC, and they're just killing it with all kinds of, we've done valuations, we know how much their company is worth, and now all of a sudden they want to cash out and they want to sell everything, they want to retire. How do we then move that person out of the business, maximizing the amount of profits they can get for all of the different things that they own? So those are sort of like the 4 steps within the wealth management or wealth asset protection when we're talking about gym owners.
Okay. Well, I love that. Anything to add as we wrap up the amount of time that you have? Because I know you need to go help your
2
wife
minutes.
actually pack some things. But I think this has been great information, and certainly something we've not talked about, and it's not talked about a lot in our industry. And you've even gotten me thinking, so buckle up, Buttercup, for some emails, because I might need to do a little bit of work on some stuff. But actually, here's one just random question that I'm thinking of right now. So I was going to let you wrap up, but if I have all these different LLCs and I have operating agreements for all these different LLCs and all that stuff, don't I need insurance for each one? Like, do I need insurance for my equipment company? Because couldn't someone say, well, they got hurt on that equipment, so now we're going to sue that company?
It could. Yep. So in certain instances, we would look at some sort of minimal insurance policies, and just insuring your equipment is not going to be as much as like insuring yourself from professional liability or general liability as far as the gym is concerned. But again, that's sort of like one of those, well, it depends on your tolerance for risk. How likely is it that somebody is going to sue you for the equipment versus sue you because you told them to get up on a pyramid and they fell? Okay. So that's just one of those cost benefit analyses that we have to talk with gym owners about. And those do go into some of these considerations. Or you come down here in California and you're paying like $850 in franchise taxes per LLC every year. What's the cost benefit analysis of doing this? So the big takeaway that I want gym owners to have from this is I want you guys to be thinking about these concepts. I want you to start to realize that when you're making money from the gym, don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel like you're taking money from somebody else. There's nothing wrong with making money because we want to build wealth. We want you to be able at some point at the end of your life be like, you know what? I have all the money that I need. We start from the beginning. You are now in the beginning, regardless of where you are in your ownership process. If you haven't been thinking about this stuff, start thinking about it and reach out to us with questions. And you and I, Dan, can get on and we can deep dive into those 4 different categories of owners because this was a lot of broad-based stuff.
Yeah. Let's do it. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. We always love having you. Hence why you'll be back a couple times. And next time in person.
In person. I can't wait.
Could be interesting. We haven't ever done an in-person podcast before. And when we talk in person, we get even more like animated and excited.
Yeah, I know.
May have to have some bake in there because we typically do our in-person meetings over breakfast.
Oh, we could go to breakfast.
Breakfast podcast with Matt and Dan. That might even need to be its own series.
That's right.
Breakfast
I'm in.
Coffee and bacon. I like that. Coffee and bacon with Matt and Dan. Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, Dan.